Hello, I'm Robert Daws, and I'm an actor. And this year, we are reviving a play that was first performed on a national tour 2 years ago by William Humble, called Woodhouse in Wonderland, which says exactly what it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's the life of PG Woodhouse told by himself with music. And we're heading up to the Assembly Rooms, George Square, Studio 3, where we open from the 30th of July and play through to the 24th of August. And it's a solo performance. So it's just me and Plum. And I can assure you, Plum is by far the more interesting part of that double act.
I'm sure it's not true, but then obviously going back to when this piece first kind of became a thing, what kind of inspired you to get involved with it? What inspired the piece to be created?
Well, I think, well, if we're going back to the very beginning, it's sort of my connection with the work of PG Woodhouse, and I came to it late. But so many people I talked to were reading PG Woodhouse when they were as children. I read my first PG Woodhouse book at the age of 20, and it goes back to my very last few weeks at RADA. And I walked in one day, and in my cubbyhole there was a brown envelope, large brown envelope, and I opened it, and there was a book and a postcard from one of the directors who'd been working at RADA at that time, someone who you and your listeners will know only too well, as the actor Tom Wilkinson. And Tom had been directing at RADA, and we'd had several terrific conversations, and he was a very inspiring man. Anyway, I opened this envelope and read his postcard and said, "Dear Bob, won't get a chance to see you because I'm off to Yorkshire before you go. So I just thought I'd leave this for you. Please, not to be returned. It is a gift. I think you'll enjoy it. I hope so. It's one of my favourite books of all time." And I looked at the cover of the book, and it was Righto Jeeves by PG Woodhouse, which I subsequently read, and I couldn't believe it, really. I'd never read anything as entertaining and as funny in my life. So I've got Tom Wilkinson to thank for the germ of this connection with Woodhouse. And then over the years, it just got more and more. I didn't know. I left when I was 20 drama school, and I didn't know that 9 years later I'd be doing the television adaptation of Jeeves and Wooster with Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. And playing Hildebrand Tuppy Glossop. So I was absolutely in my element. I absolutely loved working on that. And we were very fortunate to have a great writer on that, Clive Exton, who did the adaptations under the producer Brian Eastman's auspices. And we just had a wonderful time. And I'll stop in a minute, let you get the word in edgeways, because I was asked this question not long ago, and someone said, "What other connection do you have apart from being in Bertie, some of his plays and radio series and what have you?" And I realised that I'd probably worked with all the main Bertie Woosters over the last 50 years. I worked with Richard Bryars on a few occasions, which was wonderful. And Richard, of course, played Bertie Wooster on radio with Michael Hordern. I also worked with Hugh Laurie on television, as I've just mentioned. I also worked with Steve Mangan, who played Bertie Wooster on stage. And for 9 years, I worked with Ian Carmichael, who played Bertie Wooster in the 1960s with Dennis Price. So, in that respect, I suppose I'm sort of steeped in Bertie Wooster's, if nothing else. So, the idea came about that through Stephen Fry, really, a while back. And he said, "Well," I said, "Well, people don't really know much about P.G. Woodhouse. They love his books. and they've seen the series, listened to the wonderful radio adaptations, all that. They know his characters, they know that Blandings, they know Lord Emsworth, they know Bertie Wooster, they know Euclid, they know all these wonderful characters, but they know very little about the man. And Stephen said, well, yes, he was a very private man and had a very interesting life, not without its tragedies. And it was an area that should be explored. There was a film on the BBC with the wonderful Tim Pigott-Smith playing PG Woodhouse and Zoe Wanamaker playing Ethel, his wife, which was marvellous. But there's been very little. And people, when you talk about PG Woodhouse, know virtually nothing about him. And I did some research into this, and I realised that this was an extraordinary story that started, way back at his schooling, and took him to the United States, where he became one of the major contributors to the new American musical as a lyricist. At one point, he had 5 shows on Broadway as a lyricist, working with people like Jerome Kern, Guy Bolting, George Gershwin, Cole Porter, Hammerstein. I mean, the list goes on and on. And this is before he even wrote a single novel. So there we are. And I thought, well, that in itself is an interesting story. So I then phoned up a dear friend of mine, I'd known the late, now sadly and much, much missed, William Humble. And I said, Bill, are you interested in working on a solo show about PG Woodhouse? He said, I don't believe you've just called. He said, I just completed a screenplay about the life of PG Woodhouse. And I've just been told it's not going to be done because there's another production that's going to do it. So I've spent 2 years researching it all. So I'm ready to go. 6 weeks later, he delivered the first draft of the play, and we took it from there.
Oh, so it's kind of like it's almost a lifelong work, really. Then, suppose you kind of say it's such a connection deep down for you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Really, I mean, it's sort of. The books of the works of Woodhouse have always cheered me up. They couldn't do anything other, I guess. But I've had such happy working experiences with them, and they continue. And one of the reasons we wanted to go to Edinburgh this year in particular, we were thrilled to be invited by the Assembly Rooms to do so. Was that Bill, when he was an award-winning screenwriter and television writer, and also a wonderful theatre writer, but he had a passion for theatre, and he wanted this play to be done in this year, which is the 50th anniversary of P.G. Woodhouse's death. Particularly at Edinburgh. So Bill passed just before Christmas. So us being able to go is quite an emotional thing for myself and for our producer Denise and director Robin. It's quite a personal journey up here, and so we know it would have meant the world to Bill. Goodness knows he banged on about doing it enough. So, Bill, we're doing it, so I hope he's pleased.
And obviously, as you say, you've done it for a couple of years now, but how do you prepare for a run at the Fringe? Like you say, you're solo there. It's obviously quite an intense month of performances. How do you prepare for that?
Well, excellent question. I don't know. I mean, to quote PG Woodhouse, at this moment in time, I'm feeling as I feel wobbly from base to apex as a jelly in an earthquake. It's a very different setup. I mean, I haven't done it for 2 years. I'm in the situation where I'm relearning the text, and we are re-rehearsing aspects because we've had to cut from the main play down to an Edinburgh Fringe acceptable 70 minutes, which has been a challenge as well, but it's been great fun. How do I prepare? It's a very different thing. We went on a national tour, and we had the great luxury of actually going to theatres where you had 3 nights, 3 performances, and you weren't sort of fitting into a day's worth of extraordinarily wonderful, diverse, and brilliant productions from other people. I mean, it really is, as you know, Edinburgh Fringe is, you've got half an hour to get in, you've got half an hour to get out,
Yeah.
and you do this show, and if you run over, it has to stop. And it's quite brutal out of necessity in that respect. So, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you after we've done it. Luckily, we have previews at the Tabard Theatre in London, which we do 4 previews before we go up to Edinburgh, and then we're fortunate enough to come back at the end of August for 4 more performances at the Tabard after we've done the run up there. So I'm finding the challenge is great. I mean, I've only done the Edinburgh Festival once before, which was in 1982. I was left rather and went straight pretty much up to Edinburgh and spent 3.5 years in Edinburgh at the Royal Lyceum, doing play after play after play after play. I mean, it was just a fantastic experience, and in a beautiful theatre. And in actual fact, the first season I was up there, we did the final performances in the old Little Lyceum, which was in an old church right next door to the Lyceum. I suppose I closed it, really, but so we the National Theatre were coming up to the Lyceum over the festival. They were doing On the Razzle by Tom Stoppard, and so we had the Lyceum Company, Lyceum Theatre, created a studio theatre right across the road at the Heriot University. And I did an American play there called Vikings. And we had an absolutely fantastic time. But I've never been back as a performer. I've been back on several occasions very happily as to visit and see shows and what have you. So yes, I'm a little nervous, because it's a little daunting, but also I know it's got the most fantastic atmosphere anywhere in the world. So I'm going to lap that up and just as Woodhouse would say, crack on.
Yeah, and then as you kind of touched on already, is there a pressure, or is it kind of a bit of a creative freedom? Like you say, people don't necessarily know Woodhouse's story. Is that kind of a bit of freedom to?
Yes, it's quite interesting, because this year I've been playing Winston Churchill on 2 different projects, film and television, which has been a very different challenge, because everyone knows everything about Churchill. They know the way he sounds, the way he walks, and everything. So you have to make decisions when you're playing famous people that audiences recognise, because you have to get it right. Too much is too much, too little is too little, and you also have to be aware that you're never going to please everyone. So you just have to accept that. With Plum, it's different, really, because there's very little footage of him. And so you never really see him apart from black and white photographs as a younger man, and you never hear him speak.
Yeah.
And so decisions had to be made, really. Plum, in actual fact, certainly by the time he was in his late 80s and 90s, had a very slow and distinctive way of talking, probably very different from the way he spoke as a younger man in the 20s and 30s. So we decided I studied what we have and tried to incorporate little moments and notes and what have you. But for the most part, I just act as a sort of, I just channeled him through, and he seems to take over. So it doesn't really matter. It's not an impersonation. But no, if I did the finest impersonation, only his living family and the many academic experts around the world would have some idea of what I'd done. The most important commitment is to the audience, that we communicate the essence and spirit of PG Woodhouse and how he worked, how he thought. Of course, we visit the characters in the play, his most famous characters, but it's very much about the process of how this extraordinary writer wrote and the conditions that he needed to do his best work, which were quite precise. Really, he created a bubble around himself, and he was the most extraordinarily dedicated workaholic. Really, he worked at his art and craft rigorously all his life, and didn't like to step out of that bubble, and to some degree received some criticism for that. But there was also other elements and tragedies of his life, which Bill has dealt with, I think, with great finesse and understanding. So it's very much, people coming to see it will, of course, be in PG Woodhouse's world, and there will be Bertie, and there will be Jeeves, and there will be music, and there'll be all these sort of things, but there'll be the story of the man behind all these characters, which I like to think is an interesting and fascinating journey, and people certainly 2 years ago seemed to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, and then to throw the tables, if you could interview PG Woodhouse himself, what would you like to ask him about his life or his career?
What would I ask him about his life? Well, he was notoriously, as anyone who sees the play knows, quite guarded about anything to do with himself, and certainly anything to do with emotions, and rigorously defended the criticism of his works, that there was no real emotion in it. He used to say, there are lots of writers who dig right deep down into life, but I'm not one of them. However, it is argued, Bill argues in the play, that there is indeed emotion to be found in his work, and definitely in his life. The question I would, well, God, there's so many. So I think I'd start off with not the normal questions. In the play, there's a young biographer who tries to sit him down and ask questions, and he doesn't get an easy ride from Plum. And Plum says, "Oh, you'll never guess what he asked me. The very first question: how exactly do I write?" Well, I told him I chip away at a stone with a large chisel. So he hasn't got any patience for questions.
Yeah.
So I imagine that he wouldn't be an easy person to interview. And I would have thought the way I would approach it was literally from his characters, his education. And the first question I would just say, I said, how much of your education, how much of your, he loved books. To know PG Woodhouse, someone wrote, is to know that he's had a huge love of literature and Shakespeare. So the first question I'd ask him, because I think we get off on a good foot with it, is, what is your favourite play by William Shakespeare? And I think he would have enjoyed answering that.
Yeah, it's good question. I kind of ask these questions to everyone I interview, but scrolling back a bit now, what was the kind of first piece of theatre that you saw that was that one that thought, this is for me?
First piece of theatre. Oh, well, that's easy. As a schoolboy, I went up with my school to see the trilogy of plays, Henry IV, Part 1, 2, and Henry V, all on the same day, in a production by Terry Hands with the Royal Shakespeare Company at the Aldwych Theatre in London. And I hadn't really seen much theatre. At the age of 14, I did my first Shakespeare playing a tailor in Taming of the Shrew, I seem to recall. And the title of the play is the only thing I really remember about the experience, apart from the fact that I was probably, without question, truly appalling. But so I went up, and I'd never seen Shakespeare before. And I didn't know what to expect, and it was a school outing. But my dad came up with me, and my dad was probably even less interested than me. He was a sportsman and other things. So neither of us knew what to expect. And Alan Howard was playing Henry V, and I can remember virtually all the cast now. Emrys James as chorus, and Trevor Peacock as Llewellyn. I mean, it just went on and on and on. I didn't know who they were then, of course. It was my first introduction to them. Later on, I got to work with most of them, which is one of the wonderful things that can occasionally happen in this profession. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It started at 10:30 in the morning and finished at about 11 o'clock at night, and went on the journey of Henry and Shakespeare's extraordinary three plays. And that, I think, truly, excuse the well, I mean, I make no excuse, actually. It sort of changed my life. I suddenly went, I've never seen anything like this before. I would love to have a go at doing that. So, along with the only other thing as an actor that really blew me away was watching the BBC adaptation of War and Peace by Jack Pullman in the early 70s, and Anthony Hopkins playing Pierre. And so the combination of Alan Howard and that production of Henry V and Anthony Hopkins in War and Peace, I think, was the one that sort of lay a course down for me that I have tried for the last 46 years to follow as best I can.
You've obviously had an amazingly varied career, stage, screen, author as well. How do you kind of reflect on everything up to this point that you've achieved?
Well, I a bit Plum-like when I get asked questions like that. I'm not particularly great when they're sort of zero in on me. I look back and I guess I feel hugely fortunate. I feel very fortunate to have actually, as a younger actor, had the opportunity to have the extraordinary experiences I did, and the constant work, because a system, as you know only too well, existed within theatres and regional theatres, that meant that you could keep working and practicing and learning, something you never stop. As I'm learning now, actually going into rehearsals for this Woodhouse, it's all you never know it all, and neither should you. And when asked that, usually people say, "Oh, you've done so much, and you've done such a varied amount of stuff." And I say, "Yes, I seem to have made a nuisance of myself all over the place over the years." But I suppose, if I am honest, apart from feeling very grateful for all the opportunities that I've had, I feel hugely grateful that I've not been typed. Really, I've been able to play many different sorts of characters, which is, I think, a little bit annoying for some casting directors who, do really like to say that's what you do and that's what you do. And I've been able to play such a range of differing characters of different temperaments and tempers and dispositions. So I feel hugely grateful that I've had that opportunity to work and to be an actor. So, yeah, not a great answer, but it's the truth.
I will say you have one of the best About Me pages on any actor's website that I've read in a long while.
Good Lord, that's very nice. I must read it sometime.
It's good. It's all on there.
Good Lord, yeah. Well, I suppose that's the thing as well. It's like having the pleasure of talking with you today. I'm very good when I'm talking about a project. I'm in and I'm passionate about. I'm less good at going behind the curtain. Really, but it's very difficult in my family because everyone in my family's got a toe in the business to some degree. So we Sunday lunch with about 20 of us gathered round is more like a British Actors Equity meeting, really. But it's great fun. It's lovely being with people who get it.
Yeah.
What a strange up and down, boom and bust sort of life it is. So that's again, that's another part of my life which I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
And one of life's mysteries we'll never know the answer to is what is your favourite jam? Because that is the mystery you're keeping on the website.
It is a mystery. I don't know whether I should. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you my second favourite jam, strawberry. My first favourite jam is definitely apricot.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
Would you?
Yeah.
There we are, a man of taste and discernment. I knew we were getting on well. I must just say, as this is going out, I mean, this is a strange old time as well, because I'm going up for my second time on the Fringe. But my daughter, who was at the end of her first year at university, is going up to with a university company to do a new play up at Edinburgh as well. Which so we'll both be up there. So that's for me is just a lovely. Not exactly a bookend, is it? But it's an ongoing thing. But so she's May's going to be doing a play called The Glass House at the Olive Studios at Greenside George Street. So I'm at George Square and she's on George Street.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that. She's got her digs, I've got my digs, and the show goes on.
Marvellous. My kind of to wrap everything up beautifully for our conversation. Go for the big sell. Why should anyone who hasn't booked come and see Woodhouse in Wonderland?
Well, I'm hoping that there will be audiences, members who, of course, know and love the works of Woodhouse, and I'm hoping that people will come along who've never even possibly heard of him. Although he is one of the most popular authors throughout the world, there will be many people who've never read his book, never seen his works, never know anything about him. And I would hope that people would come along just to hear a fascinating story about an artist's life that is far from dull. And anyone who's interested in the process of how writers write, I think, might find it interesting as well, and the particular way that he approached his writing, I think, is fascinating. So that extraordinary thing is how did he become such a recognised genius of comic literature? So anyone who's looks at it and expects a dry old evening listening to someone doing portraying a literary great is hopefully going to be disappointed and picked up and driven along by the sheer exuberance and fun of it. And I get to sing lots of those lovely songs as well. And that we've had so much help from the Woodhouse estate as well. And as regards the songs in particular, PG Woodhouse's great grandson, Hal Cazalet, who curated and advised us on the selection of songs that he himself sings beautifully and much better than I, as does his sister Lara. And they've been very supportive, as has the whole Cazalet family and the many fans of Woodhouse throughout the world. Actually, we had letters and emails from all over the place. So we've got people coming from. We've got someone coming from Tasmania. I think we've certainly got someone coming from Slovakia to see the show. We've got someone coming from Poland, someone coming from Norway. We've got several people coming from the States and Canada. So it's fascinating, and it's nice to see that Woodhouse still, as he said himself, he said, "My publisher tells me that my books are now published in 30 different languages, if you've got the time to read them, that is." So people obviously are reading them, and hopefully some of them will turn up to see it at Studio 3 on George Square. But just come along. It's 70 minutes of fun, and I think people hopefully will find it fascinating and entertaining.
I think anything with you in is excellent because you're not a safe pair of hands, if that's a compliment, but you are perfectly watchable.
It is. Absolutely. I can remember I've had long conversations with one of England's famous wicket keepers, and he was always called a safe pair of hands. So that does it for me. Thank you, Mark.
Well, marvellous. It just leads me to say Woodhouse Wonderland, as you say, Assembly George Square, 30th of July to the 24th of August, but also previews Tabard Theatre, 20th of July to the 22nd, and you're back there 27th of August till 30th of August.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you very much.